Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Councillor Paula Fletcher, and I'm the chair of the Subcommittee on the Protection of Affordable Rental Housing. The clerk has confirmed that we have quorum, so I would like to call meeting 3 to order and welcome everyone who's with us tonight online at our virtual meeting, and welcome all those people who will be speaking, and welcome the other members of the committee, and that would be Councillor Brad Bradford, Ward 19, and Councillor Gord Perks, Ward 4. Say hello to everybody tonight, please, councillors. Thank you. Just before we start, I am going to ask everybody just to take a minute of silence, because tonight one of the matters we're discussing is the Tenant Advisory Committee for the Protection of Affordable Rental Housing. And before we begin, I have something very sad that I'm going to share with you. I was deeply saddened to learn of the passing of one of the members of our committee. That's Ryan Ayakawa. Ryan was a member of the city's advisory committee on the protection of affordable rental housing. He served as a person with lived experience, but also representing the Ontario Tenant Alliance, of which he was a founding member. He regularly shared his own insights and insights from other members of the Ontario Tenant Alliance on how COVID-19 was impacting tenancies, on how the Provincial Bill 184 could affect tenants, and what resources would be helpful to tenants to advocate for their rights. A fine arts graduate of York University, Ryan enriched Toronto's cultural scene as a promoter, producer for local musicians and artists. He was also a freelance writer and journalist. Music was Ryan's passion. His contributions to his community and the city will not be forgotten. Ryan will be greatly missed by his family, his friends, and his colleagues. And I would ask that you join me in a moment of silence, please. Thank you very much. Fly high, Ryan. So today's meeting is being held with members of council participating both in person, that would be me here in the committee room, and by video conference, and that would be Councillors Bradford and Perks. City staff are also connecting to the meeting by video conference. As City Hall remains closed, the public continue to participate electronically and can watch the meeting streamed live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. I would ask everybody for their patience with delays and technical issues. We know all about those during virtual meetings and WebEx and COVID. The City Clerk have connected all registered speakers to the meeting by audio, and the list of speakers can be reviewed online by visiting the Subcommittee on the Protection of Affordable Rental Housing page at Toronto.council/ and clicking on Speakers box for today's meeting. But I'm just going to read them here, so everybody, if somebody isn't on, they can quickly send a message. I have Mariana Lewicki, Helen Chilles, Aaron Kaplan, Johnny Dibb, Melissa Goldstein, Shelley Buckingham, Patterson Hodgson, and Olena Lubchenko, and Ben Puglia is co-chair of the Tenant Advisory Committee, and he'll be speaking to us after we get the staff presentation. Oh, sorry, I'm going to speak up. Before we begin, I just want to remind you all about the important health and safety measures that we must all follow today. All in-person participants have been seated 2 meters apart, and I can tell you we all are seated that way here. Please stay in your seat designated. Don't change seats or sit in another seat. When you're entering, exiting, or moving about the room, please wear a face covering. Sanitation kits are available and provided on the desktops. Attendance in this room is limited to only those persons who are required for the meeting. A number of clerks, audiovisual staff, and IT staff are with us today. Members, this is a paperless meeting, as you know, and the City Clerk has provided all agenda materials via CMP, which is the Clerk's Meeting Portal. City Clerk's IT staff will be available to both in-person and remote participants to help with your devices. We've all seen that at times people need that help. I'd like to remind staff to keep their mics muted and their videos turned off unless they need to answer questions or speak to the committee. This makes it easier for me as chair and for you watching on YouTube to observe members as they participate in the debate and vote on items. For those members who are joining us remotely, that would be you, Cord and Brad, please keep your mic muted unless you wish to question staff or speak on an item, and ensure your video is on if at all possible. As part of each agenda item, I will ask members to raise their hand or unmute their mic if they want to speak or ask a question. I'll then create a speakers list and call on members when it's your turn. If you're going to vote on, when we vote on items, I'd like members to ensure they turn on their video so you can raise your hand and indicate your vote. To ensure I can see you all, I'll ask that you keep your hands raised until we have reviewed all of the members in the room and the remote members. I'd also like to remind you that you're participating in today's meeting. Whether you're participating in person or remotely, you still have to submit and approve your motions by email. The clerk will not be printing motions for your review. If you need to confer with clerk staff in the room, please stay 2 meters apart. Staff are always available at phc@toronto.ca to help with motions. Maybe you have already sent some motions. I have. If there are any visiting members of council attending online, there are none here, I encourage you to turn on your video so you'll know that we'll know you're present, and give you the opportunity to ask questions of staff or speak. And the clerk will also assist to record attendance for the meeting. And although we're in different locations and meeting remotely, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Members, are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do, please raise your hand. No, seeing none. We need to confirm the minutes from our last meeting on November 20th, 2019. Can I have a mover? Councillor Bradford, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Before we begin, I'd just like to say a couple of things, because in particular, we had hoped to have this meeting last spring, but due to COVID, it was delayed. Some of the work to be done to address this issue was also delayed, as some city staff were reassigned to deal with COVID. But there is some really good news for us tonight. The Tenants Advisory Committee was formed, and it was able to meet to discuss evictions, renovictions, and provide many of the recommendations that we will have before us tonight, members. The advisory committee members were selected to ensure balance between people with lived experience, tenants advocacy groups, legal clinics, landlords, and from across the city. Landlords met separately. The advisory committee met in person twice before March 17th, 2020, which of course is, we know, the COVID date. During the pandemic, their engagement has continued through email, conference calls, web meetings to discuss issues with the mandate. The group was helpful, providing city staff with information in real time on the impact of the pandemic on renters. Sadly, during the pandemic, the province did not really step up to help tenants. There was a temporary suspension of landlord board hearings, but not of eviction activity, nor were rent supports offered. Worse, they brought in Bill 184, the misnamed Bill 184, Protecting Tenants and Strengthening Community Housing Act 2020. Last week, I co-hosted a webinar with my local MPP and staff of Don Valley Community Legal Services to share with tenants and some of the pitfalls of these new rules. So though we started up our subcommittee almost a year ago, due to COVID and the provincial government, the situation has become worse, and our work is all that more important. So tonight, I want to thank all of our city staff and all of the members of the Tenant Advisory Committee who have worked on this issue and who have deputed, written, and fought for tenants' rights. The saying is, home is where the heart is. What does that mean if you don't have a home? So again, everyone, thank you so much for being part of this tonight. Let's proceed with the agenda review. We have one item, that's RH 3.1, Actions to Promote the Protection of Residential Rental Tenancies, an update. We have a staff presentation, and as I read out, we have speakers, deputants, and if I missed anybody, can you please get in touch right away at phc@toronto.ca. So I'm going to ask Sherry Hanley to begin with our staff presentation. Thank you very much.
Yes, hello, Chair Fletcher, and through you. The presentation tonight is, can everybody hear me, first of all?
Yes, we can, but could you put on your video so we can see you, please?
Oh.
Thank you. There we go. Excellent.
There we go.
Here we can't see you, but there we can see you up in the corner. Thank you, Sherry.
All right. So it's my pleasure tonight to introduce a colleague of mine, Anne-Marie Croce, from the Customer Experience and Transformation and Innovation team. We've been working really closely with this office to help us address some of the communications recommendations that came from the advisory committee or the subcommittee last November, and in working with the advisory committee and people with lived experience. So I'm actually going to hand it over to Anne-Marie to give you a presentation about what we're doing to improve tenant communications and some possible next steps. Anne-Marie.
Great, thank you, Sherry, for the intro. So good evening, everybody. My name's Anne-Marie Croce, and I'm the Program Manager, part of the Customer Experience Transformation and Innovation Team, or CXI for short. You can find a little bit more about the team.
Anne-Marie, I'm going to ask you to slow down a little bit. It's hard, okay. It's a little fuzzy, so it would be good if you slowed down, please. Thank you. We'll be able to hear you better. Thanks so much.
Sounds good. You're welcome. You can find more about the team and our mandate on the report on attachment 3. So in tonight's meeting, we have Sim, the director of the program, and Jennifer, who is our design researcher. Both will be assisting on answering questions during our Q&A portion. We also have David, our design strategist, Quinn, our junior design researcher, in attendance, and they'll be taking notes. So at any time after this meeting, please do not hesitate to contact any one of us if you have any additional questions or comments. Next slide, please. Thanks. So earlier this year, our team partnered with the Housing Secretariat to tackle tenant-facing issues, specifically as they related to tenants' rights. We were tasked with this because of the comments and from hearing from the advisory committee, as well as a need to provide residents with better tools and resources. And secondly, during the November subcommittee meeting, when city staff was asked to improve communications on tenants' rights on Toronto.ca. So before we made any design and content changes, we knew we first had to better understand what the problem is. Next slide, please. So to better understand what the problem is, we needed to know what channels and resources are currently available. So we created a framework that involved speaking directly with subject matter experts, housing agency representatives, and of course, and most importantly, people with lived experience, and really digging into the data that the city currently, exists. So in the next few slides, we will speak more directly to this and what we learned during our research phase. Next slide, please. Thanks. So the city has some great programs, but they are currently underutilized. For example, Rent Safe, Rent Bank are just some examples. There are numerous not-for-profit organizations that assist tenants, and we wanted more insights on their day-to-day. So what information are people currently seeking? How do they get referred to these agencies? We know that people know about the agencies, programs, and services from their communities, from their neighbors, and from community hubs. So many of these formal and informal networks actually didn't utilize 311 so much as a resource of information because they were often redirected to the province who has more jurisdiction over this matter. So next slide, please. So next, we took a deep dive into the analytics of Toronto.ca. I know these images may be hard to read over WebEx, but I'll try to break it down. There's a dedicated COVID-19 page that came out in March. This had, over the span of March to May, this had over 10.4 million views. Yet at the time when tension and anxieties were up for tenants, they actually didn't turn to Toronto.ca housing at risk page for resources information. And you can see kind of the drop in the viewership. What we noted the difficulties that residents were facing during these uncertain times, and we expected the numbers actually to increase, but they actually decreased over time. So we wanted to change that, but we first had to dig into what the analytics actually told us and how we can actually change the dial to make an impact. So next slide, please. Awesome. So from April to June, you heard me speak a little bit about the analytics, our SME interviews, but we also did some jurisdictional and literature reviews. We connected to city staff, and more importantly, we conducted remote, in-depth interviews with people with lived experiences. So I just want to take this time and say thank you to the advisory group and agencies who really helped bridge those connections so that we can hear people's stories and experiences around evictions and access to help, around their experiences to access to help with Toronto.ca. These stories and experiences really help shape the outcome of where we are today. Next slide, please. Great. So based on the research that we have done and the incredible stories and experiences that people shared with us, we knew we needed to keep the voices of the people with lived experiences in mind when organizing and creating content. So we wanted to wire it in a way and create a tone that was reassuring to people so that they knew they were not alone, that there was support and resources available. We wanted to provide a comprehensive set of information, so no dead ends. It should always end with people feeling like they understood or learned something new when going through this channel. We wanted to make sure that we had included the types of help that people were actually looking for and needed when facing evictions or responding to their landlords. Next slide, please. So next, our team began to generate ideas of what we can do and how we're going to make an impact. So what stood out first was the website is confusing, and we needed to create something that was mobile friendly. We learned that laptops, access to computers, libraries, and high-speed internet is a luxury that not everybody has. And our data from Toronto.ca showed that housing was the #1 searched word. But when we searched it, information was outdated. The housing at risk page was actually the 4th link on the search. And when the content was located, it was often circular. So it linked to one page that linked to another and then linked to an external page and often came back to Toronto.ca. So we wanted to give people the tools to self-educate and to self-advocate and give them more confidence in their housing situation and be able to self-defend. So if they choose against different notices, they could actually respond in their own way. Next slide, please. Great. So in May, we began to generate a prototype, so kind of a mock-up of what the site would look like. But we needed to look at what the architecture of the site was as a whole. So we began to identify pages that needed some tweaking and some consolidating or reframing. So this table just provides a list of some of the pages and how we changed them and what we changed on the pages. It brought these different divisions together for numerous working sessions to discuss housing and policy and resources as it currently relates to tenants. So this really gave our team a holistic view of the tenants' rights as it touched on each of the divisions. Next slide, please. Great, so after we generated some of these ideas on how to make changes, what we did was we tested and retested the mock-ups, and then we actually delivered. So we created one centralized resource for tenants. So we organized the content more intuitively. We tested the layout over a dozen rounds with people to ensure that it was, when it was reorganized, that it was clear. We did this by giving people with lived experience as tasks and watch them as they navigated to find information on the site and reflect back on their experiences. And we did this by comparing it to the current Toronto.ca site to our mockup. From this, we added sections that were very distinct. So you can see the highlighted yellow boxes or circles. So we added in understand and fight evictions, rights and responsibilities for landlords and tenants. Next slide, please. So this slide is a current snapshot of what it currently looks like. So we added in a new slide, page, understanding and fight eviction. We created a clear, dedicated section for resources and what people should expect when receiving an eviction. We wanted to clearly identify next steps for tenants so that they know what to expect. Try to eliminate that panic and anxiety that we've heard in our stories for tenants by providing them with the right information and helpful next steps. Next slide, please. So this is the before and after. The housing at risk page was broken out, the before was broken out in very minimal sections, a little bit of an overview. So we really wanted to break it out and renaming it to rights and responsibilities for landlords and tenants. This spoke more to the end users. We created subcategories for these from commonly searched items on Toronto.ca. We wanted the titles to be clear so that it's easy to navigate, to find information quickly and efficiently. And we wanted to eliminate the need to spend more time searching. Next slide, please. So next, the finding housing page. So we broke down each of the categories into groups, so such as housing for seniors, long-term care homes, and subsidized and community housing. This is much more specific data and is a one place where people can find housing-related information so that they're able to get an overall view of the services and support that the city actually provides. People often navigate for what they think they're looking for, but sometimes it's not actually what they need. Next slide, please. Great. So our team is continuously working to provide resources and tools for tenants for future recommendations. So over the last few weeks, the team began testing other methods or ideas to get information out to the most vulnerable residents. So we wanted to eliminate this idea of searching and allowing residents the opportunity to self-serve. So without the luxury of a laptop and high-speed internet and data, so we want to eliminate those variables and bring information directly to people. So we are currently testing the hypotheses if people want to send questions or concerns about their housing situations and to receive and answer on their mobile device. So this is a two-way texting. It's not just a broadcast. People actually can ask questions and this would respond. So this messaging service only costs 1/8 of a penny to send an answer directly to a tenant, and it costs the tenant no funds. The next slide, please. Lastly, we are building an eviction prevention toolkit. So what you see here is a draft that we are building and co-creating with our end users. We will continue to conduct tests on this to make sure that we have the right tools. We are looking into providing a template to a letter that residents can send to landlords so that people feel more empowered to respond to notices. So this toolkit will be provided both in print as well as digital to agencies and community services. So this will be available and translated in different languages. So if tenants actually don't have access to a printer, the digital copy can be copied and pasted into an email, or alternatively, use a printed template, which will have a letter, or have the option to handwrite it if that's something that they choose. So this gives residents the opportunity to self-advocate for their rights by having tools and resources and give a better understanding of landlords' responsibilities as well as their own rights. Last slide. Thank you. So lastly, we will continue, as you just heard me say, we'll continue to test and make some changes based on the feedback that we hear. So if you see the bottom right-hand section of the slide is just an example of what will be on the new website. It will create a data set. So in combination for looking at the analytics of the page, we're actually going to get recommendations of is the content actually being used. So it's a better understanding of sort of what's working, what's not working, how do we make changes, how do we create this as it's an iterative process. So we do not want the data to become irrelevant or become outdated, so this is a good way to give us a check. So as I have mentioned, we'll be continuing to test and develop recommendations for the SMS and the eviction toolkit. As well, in partnership with the Housing Secretariat, if you refer to attachment 4, it outlines the outreach and communication framework to promote the sites, so the future toolkit and the potential of the SMS service. So this concludes today's presentation. So Asim, Jen, and I are available to answer any of your questions, or alternatively, feel free to email us or email cxi@toronto.ca for any additional feedback you may have. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie, very much. We're going to welcome, and Asim, thank you very much for all that you've done to create this new portal. It's pretty exciting to have a digital portal and revamp what we could see the before and after, quite stunning. I would like to welcome Councillor Mike Layton to our meeting. Hello, Mike. Welcome to the Protection of Affordable Housing Subcommittee. Can you hear Mike Layton?
Hey, Mike.
I don't think he can. He's not responding. Okay. Mike? No. Hi, there he goes. Welcome. Thank you. Hi, Mike. Good to have you with us tonight. We're just going to, before we're going to go to the deputy.
Apologies, I was finishing up another video call.
Oh, okay. Sorry to interrupt you. We're just, before we go to all the perhaps questions and speakers tonight, we're going to hear from our deputants, but we're also just going to hear from Benjamin James Poulia, if Benjamin is on the line. And he was so helpful in the Tenant Advisory Committee. He's the co-chair for that. And we're very grateful that he's willing to share some of his thoughts with us tonight. So I just want to make sure you're there.
I'm here.
Are you?
Can you hear me?
Great, we can, and welcome. Thank you so much. Please start.
Okay. Well, just first of all, I want to say I'm glad that someone in the customer experience department recognizes how poorly the search function works or doesn't work on the City of Toronto website. It was good to hear that. So I'd like to speak to two of the recommendations offered, and then to a few ideas that are not in our recommendations. First, item 2, the city must empower tenants to have an active and central role in shaping the policy and programs that affect their lives. There is a division in this city between homeowners and tenants. There are over 314,000 homes registered to rent-safe TO, and likely well over 1 million renters in this city. More than 1 out of every 3 residents in Toronto is a renter. Yet a large percentage of city management, all, if not almost all of our city councilors, and of course our mayor, are homeowners. And why? Because renting sucks. And as soon as you can afford to stop renting, you do. And I think renting sucks in part because of a teleology of homeownership that exists in our popular cultural imagination. We talk about starter homes. We talk about property ladders. This popular image of renters as passing through on our way to homeownership, I think, shapes the provision of rights and consideration afforded to tenants. The truth is that I and many others will likely rent for our entire lives. And us lifers need to have a central voice in shaping the programs that are intended to protect us. An advisory group like the one I've had the privilege to work on, given a mandate that allows them to tackle complex issues facing renters and given the power to substantively influence policy, has the potential to give voice to tenants. So, as a tenant in Toronto, I can tell you that the city's approach to handling various tenant needs isn't functional. This is item 3. In the past months, I've had to navigate 311, Toronto Public Health, Rent-Safe TO, Toronto Fire, Toronto Building, and the City Clerk's Office, all for issues related to my tenancy. This is without mentioning my dealings with legal aid, multiple pending eviction hearings where, if I were eligible for the Tenant Defense Fund, I'd be dealing with SSHA as well. And never mind the constant contact I've had with my city councilor's office to light a fire under some of these departments. Tenant-facing resources are fragmented, under-resourced, and inexplicably spread across different departments as if they were vestigial limbs instead of a well-thought-out system. If the city is to have a governance review of some kind, they should do so while leveraging a tenant advisory committee that enjoys a broad mandate and that is able to get buy-in from relevant stakeholders. Because, for instance, if policymakers at the city lived in a rent-safe TO registered building, they wouldn't need me to tell them how dysfunctional that program is. Or, for example, I wonder if Toronto Fire could tell me the last time rent-safe visited my building, or whether one department collected data that could be relevant to the other. I don't know. I can tell you that in the past week, someone from Toronto Fire came to tell our landlords to move a fridge out of the hallway, and then MLS came and told our landlords to move that same fridge out of the laundry room. I can't imagine this is the most streamlined way of doing things. It's definitely not a tenant-centered approach. One of the difficulties I faced in the pursuit of having my extant rights enforced is a lack of transparency regarding who knows what and who is doing what purportedly on my behalf. Think about it this way. If you are a homeowner and your furnace breaks, you can go down to your basement, identify the problem, and fix it. As a tenant, I don't even have access to the boiler room. I only have access to layers of city bureaucracy. I can't fix the problem even if I wanted to. In this sense, tenants are disempowered. Fundamentally, the city needs to rethink the way its tenant services are organized and how data is shared between departments and with tenants. I believe the city has the capacity to create a one-stop shop, so to speak, to engage with the needs of tenants. Ideally, a functional version of RentSafe could accomplish this. Now, this relates to my mind to eviction prevention insofar as I believe that the city needs to be pursuing a broken windows approach to eviction prevention. If the city were actively enforcing the rights of tenants that currently exist on the books, and if city enforcement officials weren't constantly reminding complainants that they are hesitant to levy fines or lay charges because landlords could take the city through lengthy court processes, perhaps we would have less of a culture where landlords feel entitled to displace tenants via N12s and N13s. And given the narrow mandate of this advisory group, here are a few things that our work was unable to comment upon that I just would like to quickly comment upon. One, that the city should be looking to grow its social housing stock through expropriation and right of first refusal with the explicit recognition that our devolved social safety net is a product of neoliberal capitalism. It is immoral that a company like CapREIT could own the homes of almost 9,000 families in this city, while it is impossibly expensive for the average working class person to enjoy the security of tenure of ownership, and that the city has offloaded the simple human need of a place to live to the private market. Two, that people come before profits, and that all self-styled progressive councillors ought to give strong vocal support to keep your rent to all rent strikers, and that councillors must stand in a vocalized solidarity with those who cannot afford rent and face eviction. And finally, taking the words of our chair, Councillor Fletcher, who at a community meeting to support the tenants of 245 Logan, and I would be curious to know if they were able to stay in their homes. When you said something along the lines are, if we aren't able to keep people in there in the affordable housing they have, it won't matter how much affordable housing we build. In the light of that, this committee ought to direct the mayor to ban evictions in the city of Toronto. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you for your work on the Tenant Advisory Committee. It's much appreciated. I will now move to our list of speakers. And taking first, I have Mary Ann Lewicki. Mary Ann, are you, there you are.
I'm here, Councillor.
Hi, how are you?
Yes, I'm here, Councillor.
Very nice to have
Okay.
you. I'm going to
Yes, and I wanted to start off by
your time.
congratulating you for that great webinar that you helped host. I, encouraged a few tenants to participate in, and they thought it was wonderful. So it was a lot of great information. Don Valley Legal Services is a great resource to our tenants, and I'm glad that they were able to share in such a broad way. So I just wanted to mention that. Also wanted to talk about some of the proposals that I saw, of recommendations for changes. I think it is really important to do a sort of a clear who does what stuff on the Toronto website. I think sometimes because the jurisdiction for renter, the authority for renter law is largely provincial, but there's a portion for the city as well. So it's really good to be able, if there's information that separates, where the jurisdiction ends in one area and where it starts again. But I am mostly here to talk about above guideline rent increases. Sadly, I'm in the position of being involved in a 5th application for a tenant defense fund for 4 buildings on our street. I'm the head of the Park Vista Tenants Association, which represents tenants in 4 buildings with about 350 units. So, one of the buildings is facing a second AGI in 5 years. And, I ran the math on the numbers and found out that the average increase was 28% in the 121 units. 23 units had an increase of more than 50% over 5 years. The highest single increase was 94%. And this is in a, I can't do air quotes because I'm not on video, a rent-controlled building. This is really hard to explain to tenants. So, I would encourage, I know it's provincial jurisdiction, but if there's any pressure you can put on to do so. And then I will finish because I know time is tight. I am going to read you a poem I've written. It's called An Ode to Cap REIT, and ode is O-W-E-D. And this is the poem. There is a company named Cap REIT who took over the rental buildings on our street. It was soon out with the old ways and in with the new. As time went on, Cap REIT's profits just grew and grew. We understand that investors demand a return, but the impact on tenants was easy to discern. Renters found it more difficult to get a repair. Dealing with Cap REIT would sometimes cause them despair. Cap REIT closed the garbage chutes without getting a permit. We complained to the city, thinking they wouldn't stand for it. But our efforts were in vain, as Cap REIT suffered no pain. The permit was waived. Our loss was Cap REIT's gain. In 2017, Cap REIT issued notices of a new air conditioning fee, threatening to take AC units if tenants didn't follow the decree. We got legal advice, media coverage, and put up a fight. Cap REIT was forced to rescind the fee because it wasn't right. Despite 2020 profits of $64,000 an hour, Cap REIT wants even more. Getting hit with a 4.7% rent hike has made some tenants pretty sore. Renters think landlords setting aside rent money for big repairs just makes sense. But Cap REIT knows shifting costs to tenants saves them dollars and cents. A pandemic is not the time to punish those who rent for the sake of boosting profits to the maximum extent. Ontario's getting a rent freeze, but landlords have a huge escape clause. It's time for politicians to stand up for tenants and change the laws. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mariana. I'm wondering if any the councillors have any questions for you. I know that Park Vista, I think, is on in your ward, is it not, Councillor Radford?
Yep, that's right. And a bit of action there going on tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So I'll be there as well. And thanks for the deputation.
Thank you.
Anybody, anyone else have a question? Can I just ask you, Mariana, you saw the presentation about the portal and the upgrading and the modernization, being able to text. Could you just give us your feedback on that, please? Did you?
I think that it's, the website has some good information. It's just, I think the most challenging thing is tenants, number one, like not understanding the jurisdictional boundaries. Number two, I think I've done this suggestions before, is that sometimes it would be helpful to have just even template complaint letters, like things for inadequate heat where the city does have jurisdiction, or, more information. Like I found myself, like if there's a property standards thing, like a standard letter saying, you are violating the property standard, this is your property standard you're violating, please resolve it by this date, or I will be forced to, take this to the city or something. I know that your staff shouldn't be the first resort to go to them, but also sometimes people don't understand what the property standards are. Like, for instance, bulk garbage bins, they're supposed to be closed at all times. There's a good reason for this, and I found out twice, recently, is because raccoons, if the lid flops onto the hill, raccoons will see that as a ramp to a delicious buffet, although they may not get what they're wanting, and then they can't get out of the bin. So, then you have to rescue them. So things, there are things, everything that's in property standards is there because it makes sense. Tenants often don't understand that, but I also sometimes get the sense when you complain to property standards, the first thing they show up and talk about how overworked they are, and how CapREIT is better than some of the other companies they deal with, which is not what you want to hear when somebody is showing up because a rule has been broken.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Appreciate your time tonight and joining us. I'm just going to note that on the line, or on our, well, not on the line, but on the webinar is our Deputy City Manager, Juliana Carboni. I want to thank you very much for taking the time, Juliana, to be with us. And also Abby Bond, who is the Executive Director of the Housing Secretariat. And I note that our Chief Building Official is with us tonight, Mr. Will Johnson. And I'm not sure if there's anyone here from MLS, because I don't know if I have the whole passel of people in front of me, so I think the clerk will advise me, but I wanted to let you know there's some very senior people here listening to the deputations and listening to these improvements that we're trying to make. I'm going to call the next deputant, and it's Helen Chillas. Helen Chillas. You are from the Woodbine Tenants Group. Helen, are you with us?
Yes, good evening. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, and welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you. My name is Helen Chillas. I am a member of the City of Toronto Advisory Committee on the Protection of Affordable Housing, chair of our 1501 Woodbine Tenants Group, and a former NGO rep and advocate with consultative status at the United Nations Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. Today, I'm speaking on the inherent, alienable human right to safe, healthy, affordable housing. Tenants today continue to face unprecedented rental costs here in our city. We all know this. One solution that will immediately help some of the most vulnerable population is for City Council to bring residential property taxes down. Most specifically, the property tax classification known as older apartment building. This decades-old tax slab must be brought into parity along with all residential property. Living in an older apartment building with taxes similar to commercial tax rates means tenants continue to needlessly pay anywhere from approximately $80 to upwards of over $200 more per month in property taxes because we live in older apartment buildings. Rental affordability can become much more within reach by putting tenants first. I'm asking for this committee to recommend eliminating the older apartment building tax classification today. Another option to help ease the burden of high rental rates, especially during the second wave of COVID-19, is for City Council members to advocate for a freeze on above guideline increases. The Ontario government recently announced a freeze on rent increases starting January 1st, 2021. But much confusion remains if this includes Aggies. It does not, at least that's my understanding. No other industry is allowed to operate while allowing their properties to deteriorate to the point where there are no other option but to conduct major capital repairs on aging buildings. In the residential world, landlords can continue to operate and to profit while their buildings are not up to building codes, not up to property standards, and some in violation of the Ontario Fire Code. Legally, no one, no company in this country is allowed to profit while in direct violation of any law. Aggies must be permanently stricken from our lexicon. I'm asking for this committee to, at the very least, advocate for a provincial freeze on Aggies before it's too late. Rent safe TO, great concept, but on the ground, it is simply not working. Our co-chair, Ben, brought it forth in a fabulous, wonderful way. I should know, our building continues to pass the rent safe evaluation, but our building is not up to code. Councillor Brad Bradford knows. Hi, Brad. Thank you for joining our tenant group on a walkabout just before the pandemic hit. You personally saw the deteriorating conditions of our building's underground parking garage, yet no MLS orders were written to comply. It took us, the tenants, advocating for our rights, and two more MLS walkabouts to finally open orders. It shouldn't have to take this. I would like to know how much of our tax dollars were actually spent trying to get us to this point. But thankfully, orders were written to comply. Then in June, these were somehow closed without merit. I live here, I know. Property standard violations remain. The underground parking is getting worse. It is flooding, and there are a lot of structural problems that we're starting to notice, even more so. I would like to recommend that a public advisory committee be formed to improve rent safe for the betterment of all tenants. I've heard that the department is now currently looking at changes, but I don't think that the changes should come from within. It should come from the public, and there should be a public advisory committee on board with this. And I have a lot more to say, but again, my time is running up, so I would like to all thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak and to also be on the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you so much for your work and for being with us tonight. Are there any questions? Councillor Bradford? Yes, please. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair, and thanks, Helen. Great to hear from you. Appreciate all the work that you can continue to do here. Wanted to pick up on your comments about above guideline increases. Would it be? I just want to clarify. You're aware of Bill 204, of course. Would you be looking for a freeze on AGIs for 2021? Would you be open to a cap of sorts? What exactly would you, how would you want that to work?
Well, if I had the option and I can just wave my magic wand, I'd like to strike them from the record. But at the very least, start with a freeze. The amounts are excessive. Our building now has just received our first above guideline increase. Mm-hmm. It has not been disclosed what the capital repairs are. Right. But I have a funny feeling it's for the underground parking and our balconies, which the landlord, in fact, was charged in court being in violation. And they also have prohibition orders. But yet somehow we're facing an Aggie. The tenants here, we're all in distress. Everyone is struggling. Most people in this country are struggling, trying to make ends meet. The cost of living has gone up, and now last minute, and literally last minute, on August the 31st at around 4 o'clock, staff, rather than disinfecting the building and following COVID-19 protocols and disinfection in buildings, distributed the notices to the tenants. So the last while, I have been spending trying to organize my neighbors, which is near next to impossible because of COVID-19 and gathering restrictions. So it's an uphill battle, and I never thought that this would ever happen. But as far as Aggie's, a rent freeze at the Ontario level, I think would be a good start. And then to look at how to completely eliminate them, or at the very least, the 3% is quite high.
We're working on this right now. Wanted to bring something to this committee tonight. I'm told it needs to be moved at council, so we're working on an emergency motion on that before the bill receives royal assent. But you and I can touch base on this further and talk about it.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
Thanks very much, Alan.
Thank you, Brad, Councillor Bradford, and I'm sure that there'll be many people lined up to second your notice of motion to council. Councillor Perks, you were off for a minute. Do you have anything that you wanted to say or question this? No, you're good. Thank you. Could I call, please, next Aaron Kaplan, Toronto St. Paul's Tenant Association Network. Aaron, are you here with us tonight?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. Yes, good to have you. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks. I'm also a member of the advisory committee. I wish to congratulate the Housing Secretariat for a well thought out report, and with a special shout out to Sherry Hanley for supporting our work. Our association supports all the recommendations presented. Although a number of the recommendations have clearly indicated when they will return to the subcommittee for further consideration, recommendations 3, 7, 8, 9, and 10 do not indicate when they will return to the subcommittee for further consideration. From an accountability perspective, all recommendations should state a date when the recommendation will be considered further, no matter how far into the future the stated date may be. The report is silent on any discussion related to new resources. The state of evictions is still unknown, as the Landlord-Tenant Board is currently addressing evictions that were filed prior to COVID. It is important that the city be ready to address a significant increase in evictions. The city does not currently have the capacity to deal with the surge in homelessness. There are a number of recommendations made by the advisory committee that are not addressed by the report being considered this evening. For example, the advisory committee stated that the city programs for renters should be more widely available, meaning existing programs should have open referral processes, broader eligibility criteria, and higher funding levels to meet increased demand. Overall, the eviction prevention and tenant support programs need to be funded at a higher level to meet the current demand. The city should re-examine existing contracts and explore increased funding opportunities, as well as considering funding more than 10 housing help centers to be more accessible to tenants across the city. There are also not enough programs and supports for tenants considering the number of renters in Toronto. The advisory committee also suggested one-stop shop models where possible, as it is difficult for tenants to identify which program is the best fit to address any particular issue. To this end, agencies and city divisions administering programs should refer tenants to alternative programs if they are ineligible for those that they are applying to. One of the action items for the advisory committee was to co-design and deliver a tenant workshop by the end of Q1 2020. Unfortunately, COVID-19 hit and in-person gatherings were not possible and continue not to be an option. The advisory committee did recommend that a list of existing tenant information webinars be compiled and that YouTube or online webinars to address key tenancy issues be developed. It's unfortunate that the Housing Secretariat did not bring forward any of these recommendations made by the advisory committee. It's unclear why these recommendations were not addressed. These issues are at the core of what needs to be addressed in the very near future. We urge the members of the subcommittee to request that the Housing Secretariat address these issues as part of the recommendations going forward. Finally, Part 2 of the communications framework found in Attachment 4 is at best a first draft and not resourced. To the best of our understanding, there is no central coordination within the city when communicating with tenants. Effective communication with tenants is the cornerstone for educating tenants on both city tenant programs as well as tenant rights. The development of communication strategies and their implementation requires effective and singular leadership. Direction from the subcommittee is required in order for this to be realized. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks very much, Aaron. Are there any questions for our deputant? No, Aaron, I'm just trying to ask everybody. You saw and you may have seen it before you got here tonight, but you saw the presentation on the portal and the new portal with the consolidated resources and better search features. Can you give us a comment on that, please? Give some feedback.
2 points, and they've been made already, but I'll emphasize them. One from Ben. The search function does not work on Toronto.ca, and it does not allow users to get to where they want to go to. And the group that put this together has come up with some very interesting workarounds, but the search function needs to be fixed. The second point made by an earlier deputant is that there needs to be a clear distinction when tenants are examining content. Are they examining content that is under the authority of the City of Toronto because it's municipal jurisdiction, or are they looking at content that is under the jurisdiction of the province? And when that content is rendered, presented, at the end of it, there should be an authoritative link back to the province so that the organization that's responsible for providing authoritative advice, that information is rendered to the tenant.
Thank you very much. I'll have to agree with you on that search function. I get on there sometimes and you can't get to where you'd like to get to. And thank you for that feedback on the jurisdictions. That's the second person that's noted that for us, with also saying what a great job has been done on that portal. Thank you, Aaron, for joining us tonight. I'd like to call Johnny Dibb from York Southwestern Tenant Union. Are you with us, Johnny?
Hi, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much for being here.
Okay. I'm at work. Excuse the printer noise. First, I wanted to make a couple comments about the staff presentation. I think it's important to always remember what the end goal of our work is. And the end goal is not to generate web clicks, and the end goal is not, and web clicks are not a measure of success. And it's even further than that. The goal of the city is not that tenants become more learned or have more knowledge. The goal of the city should be to stop evictions and to stop apartments that are vacant from going on the market for above the city's definition of 100% AMR. This is what's causing housing to become less and less affordable, and this is what's causing people to become precariously housed. So the end goal that we have is not to create a better communication system. It's to prevent evictions and it's to make housing cheaper. And I mentioned that because the title of the item that we're discussing starts with the word actions. It's called Actions to Promote the Protection of Rental Tenancies. And it's got 10 paragraphs. The first one is a report back. The second one is a report back. I don't know, are these actions? The third one is an exploration to improve customer service. That's an action for staff. That's an action for the City of Toronto, but that's not an action to promote the protection of residential tenancy. The fourth paragraph is to develop a website maintenance plan. The fifth paragraph is to identify opportunities. The sixth one is to examine opportunities and report back. The seventh paragraph is a review and update web content. The eighth paragraph is exploring opportunities for data collection. The ninth is a request, a data sharing agreement between the city and LTB. And the 10th is to develop an assessment tool. These are all great things, but the title is misrepresenting what this item is. These are not actions that promote the protection of residential tenancies. I propose that one of the three members in this subcommittee make an amendment and create an 11th paragraph that bans evictions in the City of Toronto. The mayor has powers to do this, we think. Council has powers to do this, we think. One of you can propose an amendment that reads that the Planning and Housing Committee bans evictions in the City of Toronto. And of course, you're going to say this is not jurisdiction. Of course, you're going to say that. Pass it, pass these bylaws, and then let the province challenge them. And I also propose that we create a 12th paragraph that creates a new bylaw in the City of Toronto that prohibits anyone from renting a vacated apartment for a price that is over the city's definition of 100% AMR. So the city publishes these grids of affordability every year. Make it illegal for anyone to rent an existing unit for over that price. And then, again, you're going to tell me this is not jurisdiction that you have. Well, pass that bylaw and let the courts decide. If you believe in something as politicians, as elected officials, and even as staff, if you believe that things are not working in the current system, you have to change the current system. You cannot tell me that, it's not in my powers to do this, so therefore I'm not going to do anything. If you really agree that no one should be renting an apartment built in 1971 for $4,000 a month, if you really believe that, then make it a law. Make it law. Pass a bylaw and let whoever wants to appeal it. Let the landlords appeal it. Okay? So this is my feedback. I, of course, also agree with a lot of what the other deputants said. And I, of course, see a lot of value in the communication part, and I see a lot of value in tenant education. And I'm involved in that. So I'm speaking on behalf of the York Southwestern Tenant Union. And we do a lot of, know your rights type stuff. But frankly, we want to focus more on organizing tenants and on fighting for our rights. And we want the city not just to give us tools to reiterate what people's rights are. I've dealt with tenants who've been here for 6 months and tenants who've been here for 80 years. Everyone knows that they have rights that are related to the security of tenure. Everyone knows that there's rent control in the province of Ontario. Everyone knows these things. The problem is that these things are not enforced. So the spirit of the law is that tenants should be protected in their tenancy. The action of everyday life is that landlords kick people out every day. People know that their neighbors are suffering from that. And people who are issued eviction notices willy-nilly just because they're $2 short on rent also understand what's going on.
Thank you, Johnny. I'm going to have to wrap. You're going to have to wrap it up. I've given you quite a bit of extra time tonight, but thank you for calling in from work. And I think we'll ask to be clear if we do have that power to ban evictions. Councillor Perks or Bradford, have you got any questions there? No. Thank you. And next up, Melissa Goldstein. Melissa, are you on the line?
Yes. Hi, thank you.
Hi, nice to see you.
Hi. Nice to see you again. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. My name is Melissa Goldstein, and I'm an affordable housing and homelessness advocate and a renter. I'm also a member of the Ontario Tenants' Right Facebook group, and so I really appreciate, Paula, your tribute to Ryan at this meeting. He's been a huge and tireless help to so many tenants through that group, and he's going to be incredibly missed by so many people. I'm really pleased to see all the work that's being done and being proposed to improve tenant supports. This work was urgent before, but COVID has made it even more critical. And of course, it's not a comprehensive plan of everything that's needed, but it's an important start. The city's website is pretty terrible when it comes to trying to find information, especially when you don't know exactly what you're looking for. So I'm happy to hear that a tenant portal is being developed. New York City recently developed a tenant portal to support tenants who struggle with the constant threat of eviction there. So it'll be nice to see how ours compares and how it can become an essential resource for tenants. As Johnny said, its effectiveness can't be measured by clicks. Its success needs to be evaluated based on its effectiveness in helping tenants maintain their housing and prevent eviction. Because there has been no government action to support or protect tenants who have been unable to pay their rent due to the impacts of the pandemic since the initial provincial moratorium on residential evictions was lifted, there are thousands of Torontonians who are currently at risk of eviction, and nobody knows how many. The Landlord and Tenant Board used to share eviction filing information with CIRA so that they could follow up with tenants and offer support to help them prevent eviction, but they no longer do. As a result, we don't know how many tenants may soon be evicted, and we don't know who they are, so it's impossible to contact them and offer them support. This is why I'm happy to see that a recommendation has been made to create a data sharing agreement between the LTB and the city. This is a critical gap that really prohibits our ability to support tenants and preserve affordable housing, and so that agreement will be really important. What's even more urgent right now, though, is preventing those tenants, however many there may be, from being evicted. The only reason we aren't seeing a massive tidal wave of evictions right now is because the Landlord and Tenant Board is still working its way through eviction hearings for the eviction applications filed before we went into lockdown. But that tsunami is coming. The implications of thousands of tenants, possibly tens of thousands of tenants, losing their housing on Toronto will be overwhelming. It'll make the city's shelter plan for the winter completely obsolete, and it will set all of our goals for our ambitious 10-year housing plan back in at least another decade. If those tenants are evicted, the city will instantly lose thousands of units of private market affordable housing, as landlords of newly vacated properties will use the opportunity to dramatically raise their rents, and will never get the affordability of those units back. Chances are we'll end up using rent supplements to house people in those very units, effectively rewarding landlords for evicting their previous tenants and raising the rent. If those tenants are evicted, we'll instantly have thousands of people on the street with nowhere to go, faced with a shelter system that is so overextended that it can't accommodate them. We're talking about families with children, seniors, young adults. People have homes full of belongings and necessities who won't have anywhere to put their things until they have a chance to get back on their feet financially. They're going to lose everything they own and have to shoulder both the trauma and expense of starting over from scratch. It's hard enough to lose your job in the middle of a pandemic, never mind your home and everything you own, and then have to start over when jobs and housing are scarce and the threat of COVID is everywhere. We know that shelter beds cost the city at least $3,000 a month pre-COVID, and respite spaces are at least $6,000 a month. So if the city aims to accommodate evicted people through an expansion of the shelter system, the financial cost will be absolutely enormous. If the city doesn't expand the shelter system, there will be a massive expansion of encampments across the city in the middle of winter and an escalation in anger from residents from every direction. So it's absolutely urgent that we prevent these tenants from being evicted. The city needs to lobby the province to put another moratorium on evictions and to use some of the billions of dollars of COVID funding that they're hoarding to put financial supports in place to enable tenants at risk of eviction to maintain their housing. Councillors and the mayor have to be loud and visible on this issue and demand action immediately. We need really strong leadership on this, and we need it now. In the meantime, we need to increase the funding of existing tenant support programs even further and expand access to them. The EPIC program in particular needs to be much better funded and heavily promoted, as most tenants don't know it exists and they don't know how to access it. In addition to modifying the rent bank so it disperses grants and eligibility is expanded to include people who are unemployed, which I'm very thankful that you're pursuing. It also needs to have the $4,000 per year cap lifted so that tenants experiencing months without income don't lose their housing. This funding increase can be short-term, an 18-month top-up that can be reassessed as the situation evolves. What we need is the financial capacity and flexibility within the tenant support system to respond quickly to emergencies. This additional funding for eviction prevention needs to be a priority in the 2021 budget. And then we need to mobilize the city and the public to support tenants in maintaining their housing, making sure everyone knows what resources are available and how to access support and guidance. We have to make supporting tenants through COVID a citywide project where we work together to support our neighbors in keeping their roofs over their heads. In addition, there's poor coordination among city
Melissa,
divisions.
can you wrap up,
Yep.
please? Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. In addition, there's poor coordination among city divisions and agencies when it comes to the existing structure of tenant and housing supports and the design and delivery of the supports themselves. And this will prevent city efforts from being as effective as they could to support tenants, even as services are improved. I'm hoping that this will be addressed by the governance review that was discussed at the Planning and Housing Committee meeting on Tuesday and will be incorporated into the recommendations that will be brought to Council in November. And just one last thing, I agree with Ben that tenants need to be empowered so they can shape the services designed to support them, but we need to engage tenants beyond the advisory committee. Advisory committees are really elitist and exclusionary, and they give voice to some while disempowering others.
you.
So we need to ensure efforts are extended to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Note I gave you a little extra time there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for our deputant? No? I want to thank you for being with us tonight virtually and for your advocacy. Our next debutant is Shelley Buckingham from the Centre for Equality, Rights and Accommodation. Shelley, are you on the line with us tonight?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Good evening, councillors, staff, advocates, and residents of Toronto. I'm here on behalf of the Centre for Equality, Rights and Accommodation. We began our eviction prevention work 20 years ago when the concept of eviction prevention was not widely understood or discussed as it is today. As early adopters and longtime leaders in the eviction prevention space, CERA continues to provide free services to Toronto residents facing eviction or a human rights violation in their housing that may threaten their ability to stay in their home. CERA is a proud member of the Advisory Committee on the Protection of Affordable Rental Housing, and we are looking forward to fully participate in any future consultations and outreach efforts with the city. The city's work on tenants' rights and eviction prevention is continuing to move in the right direction, and we are thrilled that the city is stepping up in these areas. We commend city staff and members of this subcommittee on the work undertaken to date, especially in light of the challenges associated with COVID-19. We are in awe of the resilience they have demonstrated throughout the pandemic. CERA strongly supports the call in the Housing Secretariat's report for increased resources for existing tenant services, information, and programs, as well as its emphasis on exploring innovative and more comprehensive measures to protect affordable rental housing and prevent evictions. On that note, CERA fully supports the report's recommendations to further invest in data collection and analysis to better inform efforts to achieve these goals. If, for example, the city was able to collect data on the average amount of rent paid through existing databases such as RentSafe, better information on exactly where affordable housing exists in Toronto would be readily available. CERA welcomes the recent enhanced investments in emergency eviction prevention measures such as the EPIC program and the Rent Bank program. We support the Secretariat's report to make, the Secretariat report's call to make these programs more widely available with open referral processes, broader eligibility criteria, and higher funding levels to meet the rapidly increasing demand for these measures. CERA has the following recommendations for your consideration. Over the past decade, CERA has watched as the circumstances of people who call our eviction prevention hotline have become progressively complex, urgent, and desperate. The dramatic rise in evictions during this time has resulted in an unprecedented demand on CERA's eviction prevention services. This demand is increasing due to COVID-19 and will continue to increase well past the end of the pandemic. The numbers speak for themselves. Each month, CERA typically fields between 80 to 90 inquiries from tenants facing eviction and requiring support. This month, CERA is on pace to double the number of inquiries and field over 160 requests for eviction prevention support from tenants. We are committed to helping any tenant who seeks our assistance, but we simply don't have the resources to do so with our current resources. CERA echoes the call in the Secretariat's report to provide more information, resources, and training for service providers on the front lines of the eviction crisis and help them increase capacity to serve tenants. We need your help now more than ever. The use of illegitimate eviction to remove tenants and dramatically raise the rent is a worrisome trend that threatens the further loss of affordable housing and disproportionately impacts low-income tenants. It stands to reason, then, that the most effective solutions for preventing the loss of affordable housing are to increase security of tenure, prevent evictions, and keep tenants in their homes. CERA urges the city to continue to explore creative and expansive ways to combat illegitimate evictions, including those outlined in the Secretariat's report. CERA recommends the city continue to improve tenant communications to increase awareness among tenants of ways to protect themselves against evictions, illegitimate or otherwise, and the existing resources available to help enforce these protections. The eviction of tenants during a global pandemic is unequivocally wrong, unacceptable, and a violation of the right to housing. We look forward to working with every member of the subcommittee to protect affordable rental housing and strive towards the progressive realization of the right to housing. Thank you very much on behalf of the Centre for Equality Rights in Accommodation.
Thank you very much, Shelley. Any comments or questions from committee members? No, Shelley, I just wanted to ask you about the portal. I've asked a couple of deputants about the portal. If you have any observations on it or any suggestions, I think now is a great time to hear about that.
Thank you, Paula. Councillor Fletcher. Personally, I haven't actually navigated through the portal myself, but I was really interested in the presentation. I actually lead CERA's communications, so I'm always interested in any efforts to streamline communication platforms and hopefully facilitate better access to information. So I think it's really smart that the staff are looking at the data and what the data says because it gives a strong signal to how useful, if people are accessing the right information and at appropriate times. So I think any efforts to improve communication streams is always worthwhile.
Thank you. And did you have a chance at the Tenant Advisory Committee to go through the slideshow that we saw or look at the actual functions on the portal yet?
I have not. I am a recent, I recently joined CERA, so I have not personally participated in the advisory committee.
Oh, I see. Okay, but somebody is definitely from CERA. Okay. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Great
much.
to have had you tonight. I'll ask our next deputant, and that's Patterson Hodgson. If you are here with us, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, I'm here.
Hello, good evening.
Hi. So my name's Patterson, and I live in Parkdale, and I live in a high-rise building called West Lodge Towers. I have been organizing with my neighbors since April, like deeply organizing. I've been organizing in my building for a couple of years now, but I've been organizing since April around evictions related to COVID. We have been gathering data in my building, and close to 25% of my building, about 25% of my neighbors are unable to pay rent right now, at least in part or in full, since April. I personally have been keeping my rent since April because I don't know what's going to happen with employment. I have no idea what's going to happen with CERB, and I might need that money in the future. In my mind, the number one thing anyone involved with this subcommittee, anyone involved in any other thing that has to do with housing, the most important thing anyone here could do is try and get City Council to ban evictions in Toronto right now. Ultimately, everything on your list is data gathering, which is great. I'm in favor of education. I'm in favor of gathering data on the situation. But like the previous deputator, whatever, said, those are not action items. And ultimately, we need action in Toronto, and right now, we need evictions to be banned. That to me is the most important thing. Like, I have been talking to my neighbors in Parkdale for months, and we haven't seen any action from City Council, from John Tory. We certainly haven't seen any from the province, and we are facing an evictions crisis. I've also heard many people talk about the backlog at the LTB as if that is not a crisis within itself. Like there's a crisis coming of evictions because of COVID-related rent arrears, but there is a crisis right now. People are being evicted from their homes during a pandemic. We have seen encampments, homeless encampments in Toronto grow exponentially. Every major park in Toronto has an encampment in it. The people who are being evicted right now, there is a pipeline to the shelter system, the pipeline from homes to encampments. We need to stop evictions right now. And it's difficult for me to understand how we could have a meeting about a website or about data collection or about these recommendations when we are in the middle of a crisis that is happening right now. Honestly, that's like mostly what I'm here to say, but like basically we have seen better results from organizing in our buildings than we have seen from any of the supports you or anyone in the past has created for tenants. The issue is not access to information. The information is there. People can find it, even people who are not as savvy at looking things up, etc. Like the information is out there and we have access to it. What we need are like solid actions from City Council, from people in power, from people in Toronto that supports tenants in Toronto. We need an eviction ban right now. And then like on top of that, like I guess expropriate and like someone said previously, cap what rents can be made. But none of that matters right now because we're in a pandemic. Yeah, honestly, I think that's all I would like to say.
Thanks so much for joining us and for all of your work, Patterson. I'm going to ask Councillor Perks or Bradford if they have any questions. Nope. Okay. Thank you so much. Next up is Olena Lubchenko. Olena, are you with us?
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Hi,
I'm speaking as a renter.
Yep. Go ahead.
As a renter, and I'll try to keep it short because I know we're running out of time. So yeah, so much has been said about how lack of affordable housing in Toronto and the GTA is a crisis we have been experiencing for well over a decade. But it has become an even more urgent matter today during the COVID-19 pandemic. Since 2006, we have seen a dramatic increase in rent across the GTA and a decrease in the supply of affordable housing. A moderate conservative estimates tell us that there has been an over 300% increase in luxury rentals. But renters in Toronto don't need the data to know that there's a crisis of affordable housing. Our governments at all three levels, but especially the provincial and municipal, that is Doug Ford and John Tory, have invoked the language of family values and hard work during this time of the pandemic. Yet, this language of hard work and family values is contradicting. They're contradicting themselves because, the passing of Bill 184 or the eviction bill will make tens and tens of thousands of diverse families in the GTA lose housing because the provincial and the municipal government have ordered and are enforcing evictions. These are residents of Toronto that have been working hard to keep us afloat during the pandemic. A lot of them are frontline workers. I want to emphasize that the provincial and municipal government are enforcing evictions in a time when our already small, precarious apartments, houses, homes have become workplaces. They have become places of education for our children and care for the sick in our neighborhoods. So children, mothers, the elderly, students, hardworking people, our neighbors, nobody should be evicted during a pandemic. So in light of this very serious crisis, I urge you, members of the Subcommittee on the Protection of Affordable Rental Housing, on behalf of Torontonians, whom you're supposed to represent, to put pressure on Mayor Tory and the City Council to ban evictions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Elena. Councillor Perks, Councillor Bradford, do you have any questions, Deputant? No? Thank you very much. Were there any other deputants that happened to join during that? No? That's great. So that rounds out and finishes off our list of deputants. So now we're going to take this into the committee, which means that our committee members are able to ask questions of staff. And I'll open that up if there are questions. Councillor Bradford, have you got any? No? Councillor Perks? No? Thank you. I just have a few. I think there were a number of good suggestions there. One was on the portal. I'm just wondering if you could let me know if the portal is live or if you're still refining it. That's one question. And second, was that portal in the way that you showed it to us, did you have a chance to show that to the advisory committee? I don't know who's going to answer. Is it Anne Marie? Yeah, there you are. Please, can you answer that? Thanks. And your team is, you're on the team, Jennifer's on the team, and Hassan is on the team. Asim's on the team. That's your team here tonight?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's our team. Go ahead, Anne-Marie.
Thanks. So the portal was supposed to be live this evening, but there's been a glitch internally, so it should be live by tomorrow morning. And did you run that by the advisory committee? Did they see that portal and give you feedback on that? Yes, they did. The advisory committee was active during all the iterations, as well as we continued to build the portal itself. There was a suggestion there that there be something clearer about the jurisdictions when you're on the portal. Are you able to take some of these suggestions tonight and continue to add to that with links? Yes, absolutely, Councillor. Pardon me? Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. We will take those recommendations and create a future iteration for the portal. We've heard a number of people say that the main search feature, including me actually, is really hard to use on the city's website. And I did go on and tried to Google the portal. How will it turn up if you go to Google? So we are working with our digital communication teams to work on that search engine portion so that the SEO, so what actually brings up the site, is actually clear and it becomes one of the first things within the Google search. So yes, we're working with digital communications to ensure that it is first and foremost on the search. And it's not going to be, we're talking about a broad search, a search engine, not the city's search engine. Correct. Correct, Councillor. So we're looking at both of those, so both on the Toronto.ca as well as Google. And are we agreeing that Toronto.ca search isn't that easy to use? Or are you talking out of school if you answer me on that one? I don't want to get you in trouble. We'll all silently agree on that. I just wanted to also ask about one of the deputants talked about recommendations 3, 7, 8, 9, and 10 not having a date or a time frame. And I'm wondering if Sherry, if you're able to comment on that, or we can put a time frame or an update perhaps. Or Abby, whoever would like to do that.
Good evening, Councillor.
Hello.
Yeah, good evening. I can answer that for you. So there were a number of things that we referenced that we did cover actually in our Housing and People Plan report back earlier this week, and also in our implementation plan. And there's a couple of items here, I think 3 and 9, which really relate to our governance review that we're about to begin. And I don't have a firm date yet for the report back. We're trying to do that as quickly as possible. I would be aiming for November, but it may be in December that we're able to bring that back. And then Action 10, the work that we're going to do with Toronto buildings. We need to scope some of that work a little bit more to understand exactly how much staff resources we need to put into that. I don't know if Will has any further comments on the timing for that one.
That would be great to hear from Will, since you're on the line.
Yes.
Hello.
So that's something we are going to look at. Can you hear me?
It's you're very muffled.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah, that is. Thank you.
Okay. I think I'm too far from the mic. That is something we're going to look at fairly quickly to scope out how we can do that work. So hopefully, I'm thinking probably start the work towards the end of this year, but we do need to scope it out.
Thank you. What about 7 and 8? Anyone want to comment on the? Today.
Through the chair, it's Doug Rollins from Shelter
Hi, Doug.
Housing.
Thank you.
Well, hi. Good evening, I guess.
Could you move in a little closer, please? Thank you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
You're very faint.
Is that better now?
A little bit.
Okay. I'll adjust once I'm done speaking. I'll speak loudly for this question and move to my headset. My apologies. We're working in lockstep with the Housing Secretariat, and with our data pieces, we can certainly work with them to expedite those in line with their timelines.
Thank you. And could you just comment, Will, on, and nobody is on from MLS, but how the divisions are working together in a more coordinated way around run evictions and looking at building permits and having a plan? Or how far away are we from that? Because that really is a big question in many people's, or desire actually.
I think that that's something that I think there is a lot of opportunity for us to do a better job on that. And that's something I want to see us do, is work more closely together to figure out a better process of how we can assist tenants that way.
Can I ask you, Juliana, our Deputy City Manager, because I'm noting that buildings is under a different, reports through a different structure to a different Deputy City Manager, and as well as MLS, and then we have the housing under your jurisdiction. So how easy is it to bring all those functions together to be as powerful as possible in defending tenancies against evictions and run evictions? Where do you see that lying to drive that?
Currently, we're working very closely together, and through the Housing Secretary, we are doing a review of how we better coordinate and align our efforts in terms of both expanding our affordable housing and building new housing, but also these other housing processes. So we stay tuned because we are working to strengthen that coordination.
Would that be through our housing?
Councillor,
sorry, yes, go ahead, Abby.
Sorry, I was going to ask Sherry Hanley to jump in because she's been working on the interdivisional staff team, and that's creates great opportunities for improving this work. Sherry, did you want to jump in here?
Thank you, Abby, and through the chair, if everyone can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, yes, I wanted to convey, Councillor, that we actually did, in parallel with creating the advisory committee, establishing an advisory interdivisional staff committee as was directed. It has membership from across building, planning, MLS, Shelter Support Housing Administration, Social Development Finance Administration, Seniors Services and Long-Term Care, and we've recently also reached out with Toronto Employment and Social Services. We had begun a lot of work to start mapping out the various different programs that we all offer with respect to tenants. Identifying opportunities around all the different tenant communication streams and events where we could be more coordinated in our work. We had established initially a subcommittee of that group working on more of the enforcement and planning and building side of things. As we indicated in the report, the majority of that staff group were redeployed or the work was reprioritized due to COVID. But there is commitment and strong desire of that group to do some more work. And as the Deputy City Manager mentioned, we also have a lot of work happening across city divisions on other housing issues. We're working quite closely with Toronto Fire, Building, and MLS and other housing issues, and it's really breaking down the silos internally, and I'm optimistic that we're going to have some good work coming together. And I think the last recommendation, number 10, from Toronto Building has been great to see, and there's also ideas around how we can improve communications through our different city applications and mailouts around different planning and building ideas. So the work is going and the silos are slowly being broken down, and it's a result of some of the direction from this committee. So thank you for that.
Just quickly, is legal on any of those?
Oh, sorry. Yes, yes. Charlotte is on it as well. I'm sorry, I didn't have the list in front of me, but yes, legal is there as well, and she's been very helpful along the way as well.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I don't know if there was a question about adding dollars into the 2021 budget for tenant protection, if that's at all possible. And I'm wondering if, Juliana, you can address that quickly into EPIC and
So we can
other.
always include it as a new and enhanced, but it would have to go through the budget process.
So Councillor Perks might make some motion for that tonight so we can get it. You're not? I'm not going to put it through tonight? Okay. We'll find another way to do that. Those are my questions. Thank you very much. And I'm going to open up the floor for speakers now. Councillor Perks, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can you speak up, please?
Listening tonight, pardon me?
Can you speak up a bit, please? It's just a little hard to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Listening tonight, I just kept getting struck over and over and over again that this subcommittee was established under one set of circumstances and we're now operating in another one.
True.
The advice and ideas that staff are bringing to us are very good pieces for enhancing the tools that the city offers to tenants in normal times. And further, I think there's a great message that the work that this committee has undertaken, that finally the City of Toronto, for the first time since amalgamation, is coming down clearly on the side of tenants and will work to help them. And we heard some very good advice that fits with that mandate from members of the community. For me, it's actually a new and good way to frame things, to say, work to maintain property standards, to stay on top of landlords around property standards, is actually, when you think about it, a long-term strategy to prevent eviction, because you build that regulatory relationship with landlords so they don't feel that they can cut corners, and then they don't wind up evicting people. So that's a good piece of advice. And it's always good to be reminded that half the population of Torontonians are tenants, and nowhere near half the services the City of Toronto provides are services to tenants. And that's always good to keep in mind. But we're in the time of the pandemic, and the services and scope and mandate of this committee wasn't designed for dealing with that problem. And we heard over and over again that there is an urgent crisis coming now, right now, and that the measures that are being offered here are not ones that deal with the very real possibility of a human tragedy in the winter months of this year as a result of evictions. A number of people asked us to consider what we can do to try to get a ban on evictions. And I'm just thinking about it. This report goes to the October meeting of Planning and Housing, which will be a late October council meeting, and that's too late. So I'm going to undertake to work with other members of council to think about how, in the council meeting we're having in just a few days, we can get a debate about asking the province to reinstate the moratorium on evictions. I think there's ways to do it, and I'm going to undertake to do that work. I wanted to say a word, though, to the people who are asking us to just ban evictions right now as council. A lesson I have learned as both a community organizer and an elected official, the worst thing you can do as a community organizer is to make a promise that you can't keep. To encourage people to support a campaign that can't win. Absolutely, the City of Toronto has to take the province on around evictions. But to claim that we can do it ourselves is to misdirect, mislead, and ultimately defeat movements for tenants. And I won't do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Councillor Bradford, yes, please. Can you also tell us a little bit about your action tomorrow at Park Vista? I think I'm very interested in knowing what you're doing and supporting tenants. Dawes Road.
Well, I think Acorn's got a rally there at 1 o'clock. So if you're out in the East End, and I know you are, if you want to stop by, that would be great to have you there.
I can even take the bike
everybody
lane. I can even take the bike
has
lane to
the
get there.
ability and opportunity to join, I think that would be wonderful. But I'd like to thank all of the deputants tonight for sharing their time and their experience, the folks on the committee who again have been sharing that lived experience and their expertise on these files. It's quite striking when you listen to the deputations, and not just tonight, but the folks that come out to Planning and Housing Committee, the folks that make phone calls and emails. There is a lot of expertise on these issues, and there are people who are organized and who are taking action. And I know that you look to us and elected officials and council in the city to support you. And we have to get better at that, and we have to do more. I take the advice of Councillor Perks there. I think someone who has a lot of experience in this space as well, and Councillor Fletcher. And certainly there's lessons learned there too. I want to thank staff for all of their work on this. Certainly we have moved the needle significantly in terms of creating pathways and important vital information that's really needed for folks who are taking on a landlord or experiencing evictions, going through that really traumatic and difficult process. Again, a lot of the folks on the line tonight engaged in this process have the answers. You're experts, you've been through this. But I can tell you just the phone calls and the emails that come to our offices, and it often comes when it's too late. And there are people out there who struggle and may not have access to these resources. So I'm hopeful there's still room for this to improve, but as we get it online and roll out the kinks and continued feedback on that is very helpful so we can improve it. User experience in all of our city services is something we have to be really mindful of, because if it's not convenient, if it's not easy to understand, if it's not easy to find, it won't be an effective tool. And the deputant who made the point about, the goal is not click rates or how many people land on the page. It's about how many evictions we can prevent, and that's really good perspective and good advice for all of us. So thanks again to staff for their work on this. More to come. As I mentioned, there will be stuff we're working on above guideline increases, and I know Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Perks will be bringing stuff forward to council right now, rather than back to planning and housing in a month from now, because now is the time. So thanks again, everyone. Appreciated your time and energy tonight and all of your advice.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bradford. I am going to make my remarks now. I do have a couple of motions that I've got prepared here, and this is number one. Here we go, sharing. Even before, I didn't know I was going to hear some of those things, but this is to have some user-friendly forms, and I think they'll probably be able to be on the portal, that people can simply fill in around evictions, around above average increases, and things where you just have to get on the record and send something in. And number two is to look at, you can see that we would come back to November with opportunities to improve data collection and the analysis, and also how we're going to monitor residential evictions in Toronto by collecting information on it. We particularly, and I'll just speak to both of those now, starting at the bottom, but with COVID, and Councillor Perks is absolutely right, we started off with one crisis, which was rent-evictions, and now we have a combined crisis of COVID with rent-evictions and evictions in a way that we hadn't seen before because of the pandemic and people's incomes and the instability and insecurity that's come with this pandemic. We did start off with a very clear mandate here, which was rent-evictions and 12s and 13s. And I think what we're coming to is I'll just call a full suite for tenants. And we have developed this portal, which I don't think we've had before, and I want to thank the staff very much for their work on that. And I want to thank you for putting texting in there, because many of the tenants I know, they text. They're not going on the website and using data, they're just texting in, and this is very user-friendly to make it that way. And setting up the advisory committee, which looks like it could become permanent. We're going to hear about that. And to note what you said, Councillor Perks, just since amalgamation, just having something formalized to support tenants, using the expertise that so many of you have, and the deputants that were here tonight, thank you for being here, and the tenants who came to planning and housing. There's tremendous learned experience and expertise in the community that we hope to harness, and the openness of our staff in all the departments to work with tenant advisory and to realize the crisis that we have. So this is a very big tenant focus that I think we're developing in a way. I'm very proud that we are doing that. I'm very happy that Councillor Perks and Councillor Bradford and myself can be part of this committee to advance this work. As far as the forms are concerned, in my work and going shortly to a building where there's a renovation starting on Cosburn, one of the things that people just need to have is something where you fill it out and you say, I'm coming back, here's my intention. Things that are easy, that are easily obtained, that have legal standing, that the lawyers might get you to write anyway, but there's a lot of pressure on all of our legal clinics. So having a little suite of materials that are easy for tenants to use, to send where they have to, that are properly laid out, filled out, meet the standards and tests that are required, I think will be very helpful. And I just want to reiterate that next time we'll put the meeting further ahead so it's coming to the planning and growth. We have enough time to get to planning and growth with any of the recommendations. I'm very happy that Councillor Perks will be bringing that motion to Council, and Councillor Bradford has a great motion to go directly to Council. I do want to thank all of our fantastic staff led by our DCM, and thank you for the staff, our building official who's coming from the hard services side tonight, and for the coordination that you're all trying to do, and to you, Ms. Hanley, for your work here in leading this. I just want to thank the clerk staff, because you have to be here all the time during COVID, and you're essential workers. You can't be out somewhere else. You have to be here. So I want to take note of that. And again, thanks to all the deputants who joined with us here tonight. We'll be back in November with an update on many of these things, as you've heard. And I'm going to be testing that search function, Anne-Marie, as much as I can over the next couple of weeks to see how well we're doing on that. So thanks, everybody. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Oh, wait, hang on. No, I can't. Pardon me? Let's vote on your motion. Oh, sorry, we have to vote on my motions and receive the other motions. I was getting so excited. All right. Can I have a vote on these two motions that are in front of you, please? I'm moving them. All in favor? Thank you. Can I have a vote on the recommendations? The item as amended, the recommendations and the item as amended. All in favor? Thank you very much. And now I am going to say that concludes our business for today. Thank you, everyone. And this meeting is adjourned. Thanks very much. Good night.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, staff.